Okay, so today we're going to deep dive into something pretty significant happening right in our backyard.
Hmm.
It's the India-Sri Lanka relationship and how rapidly it seems to be getting closer,
Right.
especially after Prime Minister Modi's recent 3-day visit to Sri Lanka.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, for anyone out there gearing up for the UPSC exams,
Yeah.
this is a must-know topic. I
Oh,
mean,
no, we're sure.
it's a real crossroads of international relations and how India navigates its foreign policy.
Absolutely.
And of course, it has huge implications for, stability in the region and the strategic chessboard.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Oh, wow.
And what really makes this moment so interesting is that it's Prime Minister Modi's first trip to Sri Lanka since President Anur Kumar Dissanayake took office.
Right.
And get this, President Dissanayake chose India as his first foreign trip after becoming president,
Oh, wow.
meaning Prime Minister Modi was like his first official guest.
Oh, that's a statement.
Right. So those initial moves by both leaders really tell you how much they're prioritizing this relationship.
Yeah, you don't just pick your first trip or first guest lightly.
Exactly. It's all about signals.
So over the next few minutes, we're going to unpack what's driving this momentum.
Okay.
We'll look at the agreements they signed, the symbolism behind all the diplomatic fanfare,
Right.
which often speaks volumes, let me tell you. And crucially, we'll analyze the strategy at play, especially with China's growing presence in the region.
Yeah. Can't ignore that.
Our aim is to give you a clear and concise understanding of what all this means for India, for Sri Lanka, and for the whole neighborhood.
Makes sense.
Okay, so let's jump right in and break down those high-level talks that took place in Colombo.
All right. So those discussions in Colombo were a big step forward, building on what they call the joint vision for a shared future.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
This framework was actually set up during President Disanayake's earlier visit to India.
Okay.
It zeroes in on areas where they both have a stake, like economic partnership and cultural exchange.
Right, makes sense.
So these latest talks were a chance to see how far they've come with that vision and to basically double down on those goals.
Okay, so reaffirming the commitment.
Exactly. And beyond those big picture talks, they actually signed 7 memorandums of understanding.
7 MOUs. Wow, that suggests they're covering a lot of ground.
Oh, yeah. Definitely across a bunch of important sectors.
We won't list every single one here, but
Right.
it's worth noting the sheer variety these agreements cover.
Absolutely.
And there's one area that really pops out: defense and strategic cooperation. They announced what's being called a landmark India-Sri Lanka Defense Pact.
Now that's big.
That feels like a major development.
It is. This defense pact is all about ramping up the strategic and maritime cooperation between the two countries.
So they're getting serious about working together on security.
Oh, yeah, and here's the interesting part.
Okay.
Sri Lanka basically gave India a guarantee that they won't let their territory be used against India's security interests.
That's significant.
And Prime Minister Modi was really positive about this commitment.
I bet.
It shows a deepening trust and a growing alignment on strategy.
Yeah, it's like they're moving from every nation for itself to we're in this together.
Exactly. Especially with the shared challenges in the region.
Right, so more joint training maybe.
Possibly even coordinated responses that we haven't seen before.
And when we talk about strategic alignment in this part of the world,
Right.
you can avoid talking about China.
Yeah. Their footprint in the Indian Ocean is growing.
So is it fair to say that this defense pact is at least partly a response to that growing influence?
It's definitely one way to look at it.
Okay.
When you zoom out to the bigger picture of regional geopolitics, India and Sri Lanka, having stronger defense ties, creates a more solid and united front when it comes to security in the region.
Okay, so it's about projecting a more unified strength.
Exactly. This pact allows them to be more structured and cooperative in key areas.
Like what specifically?
Well, things like maritime security and sharing intelligence.
Which are both crucial when you consider China's increasing presence.
Oh, absolutely. You can't separate those things.
Shifting gears a bit from security,
Okay.
economic and development cooperation seems to be another cornerstone of this relationship.
Oh, yeah. Front and center.
They specifically mentioned developing Trincomalee as an energy hub, for instance.
Right. The energy sector is definitely a priority.
And they virtually inaugurated the Sampur solar power project, right?
Yes. That's a concrete example of their collaboration on clean energy.
Beyond just energy, they seem to be hitting a lot of key areas.
Well, yeah. They talked about everything from digital infrastructure to healthcare to making trade easier and regional development.
It's a pretty broad agenda.
It is. And another detail worth noting is that they signed a framework for India to give grant assistance specifically to the eastern province.
Interesting. So they're getting granular with it.
Yeah, they are. And besides that big defense pact, there are reportedly other MOUs covering things like renewable energy projects and research partnerships in agricultural technology.
Wow. So it's a really diverse partnership.
It is lots of moving parts.
Now, India has really stepped up to support Sri Lanka, especially during their recent economic crisis.
Sure.
$4.5 billion in assistance is a serious commitment.
It is a lot of money.
What does that level of support tell us about this relationship?
Well, India's help during that tough time was essential.
Right.
I mean, they provided credit lines, food, fuel aid, you name it.
Really helps Sri Lanka weather the storm.
Exactly. And the fact that they're now discussing debt restructuring and a possible currency swap agreement shows that India is invested in Sri Lanka, achieving long-term economic stability.
So it's not just a quick fix.
No, they're looking at the long game.
And it's not just traditional economic aid either.
Right.
There's a clear focus on working together on technology, especially in the digital realm. That 300 crore rupee grant for Sri Lanka's digital identity project is a prime example.
Yeah, that project is a huge undertaking.
It is.
And India shows they have a broader vision for digitalization across different sectors.
So it's about more than just one project.
Yeah, they're talking about making governance more efficient, improving public services, boosting financial inclusion.
Basically bringing Sri Lanka into the digital age.
Exactly. In this day and age, a strong digital infrastructure is just as important as roads and bridges.
Right. It's the backbone of the modern economy.
For sure.
Now, beyond all these concrete agreements, there were some seriously symbolic gestures during the visit.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The fact that President Dissanayake picked India for his first foreign trip, and now Prime Minister Modi is the first foreign leader he's hosted, that seems incredibly intentional.
Oh, absolutely. Those initial diplomatic moves are sending a very clear message.
Like we're best buds.
Basically. It's all about showing the world that it is. And this is actually Prime Minister Modi's 22nd international award.
Wow, he's racking them up.
He is. It really shows you his global stature.
Yeah, he's a respected figure on the world stage.
And more importantly for this conversation, it highlights the strong cultural and diplomatic bond between India and Sri Lanka.
It's like they're going beyond just the political and economic stuff.
Exactly. It's about shared heritage, cultural revival, and even spiritual diplomacy.
Especially those enduring ties through Buddhism.
Yes, that's a big part of it.
And the welcome they gave Prime Minister Modi was pretty impressive too, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, they rolled out the red carpet.
That ceremonial reception at Colombo's Independence Square, they said it was the first time a foreign leader got that treatment.
That's what they said. It was a historic welcome.
So between that and the Misra Viparshana Medal, it's clear they're not just paying lip service to this relationship.
No, it's the real deal.
And the symbolic visits during the trip also highlight these connections. The planned visit to Anuradhapura to open up those India-funded development projects.
Right.
And then laying a wreath at the IPKF memorial.
Yes.
Those are powerful gestures with a lot of historical weight.
They are, for sure.
And just for those listening who are studying for their exams,
right.
IPKF stands for the Indian Peacekeeping Force.
Yes.
Which was active in Sri Lanka back in the late 80s.
Right.
So going to Anuradhapura shows that India is committed to helping Sri Lanka develop and that they respect Sri Lanka's rich cultural and religious heritage.
Absolutely.
And that gesture at the IPKF memorial is especially significant.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they're honoring the sacrifices made by those Indian peacekeepers. And maybe signaling a more mature phase in their relationship.
It's about moving past some of the more complicated parts of their history.
Right, leaving the baggage behind.
And focusing on the future.
Okay, so we've been talking about the strengthening of ties.
Right.
But we can't ignore the elephant in the room. China. They've got a pretty big and growing presence in Sri Lanka.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about it.
Their investments in infrastructure are substantial.
Huge. Sri Lanka has gotten something like $3.7 billion in investment from China.
Wow.
That money has gone into all sorts of infrastructure development, like a new oil refinery in Hambantota and a bunch of projects under their Belt and Road Initiative.
So China's a major player in Sri Lanka's economy.
Oh, for sure. It's a big part of the picture.
And the Hambantota port in particular has been a hot topic strategically.
Yeah, that's been a point of contention.
Especially since Sri Lanka leased it to China for 99 years after they couldn't pay back their loans.
Right. That raised some eyebrows.
And then you have those visits by Chinese surveillance vessels, like the Yuan Wang 5. Understandably, India is a bit concerned about what that means for maritime security in the region.
Of course. It's hard not to be when you see ships like that docking.
And so the situation with Hambantota is definitely something to watch.
Oh yeah, it's a key piece of the puzzle.
Especially those concerns about China potentially using the port for both civilian and military purposes.
It's valid concern.
And even with all that, Sri Lanka is still letting those Chinese ships dock.
They say it's just for replenishment.
Right, replenishment.
But it definitely adds another layer of complexity to the situation.
So against this backdrop of China's growing influence, this recent strengthening of India-Sri Lanka ties, especially this new defense MOU, feels even more strategically important.
Oh yeah, it's a big deal.
You called it a strategic recalibration earlier.
I did.
What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, what's really significant is that this is the first ever comprehensive defense MOU between India and Sri Lanka.
So it's not just a one-off agreement.
No, it's a sign that they're serious about moving beyond those ad hoc ways of cooperating.
They're putting a real framework in place.
They are. It's about expanding existing defense initiatives in a structured way.
What kind of initiatives are we talking about?
Everything from beefing up maritime security and intelligence sharing to boosting strategic collaboration.
So it's a pretty wide-ranging agreement.
It is, and it could even lead to joint training exercises down the line.
And you mentioned this could be seen as a kind of reset. After a period where things were a bit more cautious following the IPKF withdrawal decades ago.
Exactly. For a long time, there was this sense of caution in the relationship.
Baggage from the past.
Yeah, you could say that.
But this new defense MOU suggests they're both ready to look to the future.
It's about building a stronger security partnership.
And it's hard not to see this as at least partly a response to China becoming more assertive and influential in the Indian Ocean.
It's definitely a factor. You can't ignore that context.
Now, there was also talk about President Disanayak asking for India's help with something pretty specific.
What's that?
Presenting Sri Lanka's claim to the UN Commission on the limits of the continental shelf.
Oh, right. That's interesting.
What's the significance of that, especially when it comes to maritime security and regional influence?
Well, for those who don't know, the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf, or CLCS, is basically the body that decides whether a country can extend its maritime boundaries.
Okay, so it's about who controls what in the ocean.
Exactly. So by asking for India's technical expertise, Sri Lanka is hoping to push those boundaries out beyond their current exclusive economic zone.
So potentially controlling more of the ocean's resources?
Yes, and asserting more maritime rights.
And India is willing to lend a hand with that.
They are, which again underscores how deep this strategic partnership is becoming.
It's like they're saying, we've got your back.
Yeah, it's a show of support.
So to sum it all up, Prime Minister Modi's visit seems like a real turning point.
It does.
It shows a pretty significant strategic shift in how India and Sri Lanka are dealing with each other.
And that Mitra Vibhushana medal really drives home the point.
It does. It's a powerful symbol of how close they're getting both culturally and diplomatically.
It's more than just a piece of metal.
It's a statement.
Exactly.
And it definitely seems like India is actively reinforcing its neighborhood-first policy and its SAGAR doctrine.
Which for our listeners stands for Security and Growth for All in the Region.
Basically, they're saying we're here to stay and we're here to work with our neighbors.
And they're doing it in the face of China's expanding influence.
It's like a bit of a balancing act.
Yeah, you could see it that way.
So what you're saying is this visit and all those agreements they reached, it wasn't just random.
No, not at all.
Both India and Sri Lanka are consciously and deliberately trying to strengthen their partnership.
They're on the same page.
And that's based on their own individual needs.
Of course.
But also on this bigger geopolitical game that's playing out in the Indian Ocean.
It's all connected.
So the main takeaway for me is that we're seeing a real deepening of the strategic partnership between India and Sri Lanka.
Absolutely. It's undeniable.
And for our listeners, especially those prepping for the UPSC exams, this is something to keep your eye on.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Understanding the ins and outs of international relations and how India handles its relationships with its neighbors, that's crucial for both your mains and prelims exam.
They'll come up for sure.
So pay close attention to how these agreements and alliances play out. Think about how they might shape the region in the months and years to come.
It's a dynamic situation.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you to chew on.
Okay, I'm listening.
Given all these developments, how do you think the relationship between India, Sri Lanka, and China will ultimately change the strategic landscape of the Indian Ocean?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is. It's complicated, but it's worth thinking about.
Lots of moving pieces.
If you found this deep dive helpful in understanding this crucial relationship, hit that like button, subscribe to the deep dive, and leave a comment with any questions or thoughts you have.
We love hearing from you.
It helped us make the show better.
For sure.
And just so everyone knows, the info we talked about today is based on reporting from the Times of India.
The TOI.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
See you next time.
Bye for now.